Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Admiral, General, both of you for your decades of service and the service of all your family members. Great to see so many here. Thank you for answering the call on these important positions. As the Chairman mentioned, the National Defense Strategy emphasizes the return of great power rivalry with China as the pacing threat in the Indo-Pacific is the primary theater. In this committee, in the last 3 NDAAs, has not only emphasized that, but has also emphasized and required the Department of Defense to do much more with regard to a strategic focus on the Arctic and our forces there. So what I want to do is focus a little bit of my questions in these 2 areas. Despite the NDS focus and the discussion of the Arctic here, the force posture of the Marine Corps in particular, but also the Navy in that region, to a lot of us seems stale. And by that I mean it's pretty much, if you look at what the end of World War II left with regard to force posture, that's where our forces are pretty much right now. Would you agree to work with this committee on looking at ways in which to optimize the force posture of the Navy and the Marine Corps in the Arctic and in the Indo-Pacific? Admiral?
Yes, sir, absolutely. We look at this in a strategic laydown methodology.
Do you agree that the force posture is stale, hasn't been looked at in an appropriate manner to match the NDS?
To your point, Senator, the reemergence of great power competition has woken us up to, take the cobwebs out from lack of really paying attention, or I should say, being able to exercise our force to be ready for that kind of competition again in the future. So it is appropriate for us to continue to look at the force posture in the Indo-Pacific.
General, do you agree with that in terms of the force posture and how we need to update it?
I think Admiral Davidson highlighted that as well in his testimony. And the ongoing DPRI effort to reposture the force is part of that discussion.
Well, we look forward to working with you, this committee, on doing that. There's been a number of us who've been very focused on it. I think we're a little bit slow on this one. Let me ask, first, I actually believe that the current Secretary of the Navy and the Commandant, General Neller, agree with that and the need to look at re-examining our force posture. Admiral Moran, I wanted to just get your commitment to work with this committee and the Secretary of the Navy on a number of things he's committed to, both in testimony and in a recent Wall Street Journal article where he talked about the need for freedom of navigation operations in the Arctic, which we haven't done in quite a long time, large-scale amphibious exercises, again, in the Arctic, places like ADAC, looking at warming up the ADAC Navy base with regard to P-8s, and the need for strategic Arctic ports. He's looked at all of these issues. He's committed to work with this committee on these matters. Will you commit to work with us, if confirmed, on these issues as well?
I do, Senator.
And how about a commitment, if confirmed, to come to Alaska with me to look at the strategic terrain of the Arctic and really the gateway to the Asia-Pacific as well in many of these areas?
Sir, I'd love to go back to ADAC. I was there in September of this past year, and it's unfortunately the mothball state of that base did not make me feel real good.
Yeah, it makes you feel kind of sick at your stomach when you look at how strategic that base is with regard to the gateway to the Arctic and the Asia-Pacific. It's a lot further west than Midway and other places. A lot of people don't know how far west that base is. General, I want to thank you for very much for joining me in Alaska just last week and taking the time to come to my state. I know you've been up there before. The Marine Corps, as you know, has a proud and distinguished history of serious cold weather operations, whether it, Chosin Reservoir or Incheon, every climbing place is part of our hymn. General Neller has been concerned about how the Marine Corps has lost its ability to conduct large-scale operations in the cold weather. You may have seen, and I'd like to submit this for the record, Mr. Chairman, the U.S. Naval Institute had an article about the Marine Corps' recent 24th MEU exercises with regard to cold weather ops that were a lot of challenges came out. So General Neller and Secretary and the Secretary of the Navy have been interested in significantly increasing training and deployment opportunities in Alaska to help address what I think most would agree is kind of an atrophy of Marine Corps skill sets. Would you work, in terms of cold weather operations, would you commit to work with this committee on looking at the opportunities to do more training in Alaska, more training at Jay Park? As you know, the National Defense Strategy has Russia, China, North Korea as some of our biggest adversaries that we need to focus on. These are cold weather, mountain terrain areas. Would you commit to continuing those policies to look at those opportunities with this committee?
Senator, I will commit to work with the committee closely on any kind of training that benefits our combat readiness. Yes, sir.
How about more specifically, General Neller had focused on having no less than 7 Arctic cold weather battalions in the Marine Corps. He talked about Marine Corps planning was looking at rotational forces through Norway and Alaska to establish this very important fighting skill. Would you commit to working with this committee on fully exploring those opportunities and needs of the Marines?
Senator, I think if confirmed, I would do the same thing as General Neller, which is look at what the nation through the Secretary and Chairman require of the Marine Corps, figure out where we're meeting that mark in terms of capability and capacity and where we're not. I will absolutely commit to working with the committee on any areas where, in my view and the Marine Corps' view, we don't have the capacity.
Do you think the Marine Corps' cold weather, extreme large-scale cold weather skill, mountainous terrain, has atrophied over the last 20 years?
20 years ago, I don't know the capacity, how many battalions were trained in cold weather. I know it's a critical training requirement for the Marine Corps, as is operating in the jungle, and it's not transferable. It's a skill that you can, if you don't practice it, it'll atrophy fast.